Meeting started. Sorry about the delayed start. We had some technological challenges, which is typical. I'd like to welcome everyone. I am Jesse Smathers, the Innovations Technical Director at Smoky, and we will start out by introducing everyone that's here in Asheville. Start over there with you, Amy.
I'm Alex Summerskip, Summerlin Homes. Annette Kirkland, Summerlin Homes. Price Storybook Farm. Wanda Steels with Reach for Independence.
Sonia Fitz with Open Hearts Art Center. Diane Dalton, Skill Creations.
Caitlin Stills, Reach for Independence.
Tom McClure, Parent, Skill Creations.
My name is Aaron.
Let's see, we'll go.
Lynn English, Smoky.
Tina Clark with Smoky.
Lindy Montesano with Smoky.
Kathy Bader, family member. Janice Donovan, EOR, Parent.
Jane Lindsay Garden. Jenna Price Farrell, Parent, and the first.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to Boone.
Oh, Brian Barfield with RHA.
Scott Glaze with RHA Deep Gap.
Cheryl Church with Smoky.
Heather McGroarty with Smoky. Annie Polly with Turning Point. Joey Prophet with Turning Point. Christy Lupton with Watauga Opportunity.
Ronnie Ryan, Parent Provider.
Kelsey Bozeman, Turning Point.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, Michael, they said in White from Boone, North Carolina.
Okay, let's move on to Lenore.
Hi, Mary Short, Katie.
And I'm John Frazier with Smoky. That's all of us here in Lenore.
Okay, moving on to Silva.
Parent. Beverly Gaddis, Making Citizen Ability.
Paige Edley, Easter Seals. Jody Miller, Family Support Network of Region A.
Rhoda Van White, Smoky.
Okay, thanks. In your packets, I hope everyone has a packet, is an agenda. The items outlined on that agenda are some news and announcements, more information about the Home and Community-Based Services Transition Plan, information regarding the state level stakeholders meetings and waiver development, information about our new webpage, and the relative as direct support employee prior approval procedures on that is posted also, and guidance concerning the use of protective devices, and I may have failed to include that in the packet.
No.
So we may have to move that to next month. I have received requests to discuss care coordination responsibilities in a meeting, and that will be added to a meeting in the very near future, likely the May meeting, because of scheduling conflicts. That's what we had to work out. And I've also received some inquiries regarding the settlement with between the department, Cardinal, and the class action group regarding the sports intensity scale. And that will be touched on in a later meeting also because of the date that I received that information. Is there, may I have someone move to approve this agenda?
Second.
All right, great, thanks. Next in your packet, you should find the notes from last month. Please, these are the draft notes. Please review and make sure that if you were here, you're indicated as here. And just take a couple moments to look through these things before we move to approve them and then go through the action items. You'll notice that we added a column for other attendees to capture folks that aren't on the committee or aren't Smoky staff. And I'm indicating those folks by location. I have received a request from one member of the committee to be replaced, which we'll move forward with that by next meeting. I get a movement to approve these minutes.
I'll make a motion to move to approve the minutes.
Okay, we wouldn't move anywhere without Janet making motions. Thank you. Can I have a second anywhere?
I'll second.
All right, thank you.
Jody.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Okay. We're moving through the action items. First action item, coordinate completion of website link. We now have a website dedicated to the Smoky Innovations Stakeholders Committee. The items that we discussed will be posted under the meeting dates. And I did plan to write a summary at the beginning about what the Smoky Innovations Stakeholders Committee is and get that added to the website. And when I'm sending out information regarding this, it will be included as a reference point for folks. We will be posting meeting minutes once they are approved, and the same with the draft, or with the agendas. Does anyone have any questions regarding those pieces? So we can check that off of the list as something completed. Coordinating communication of the relative direct support employee procedure. We did get a communication out last week regarding this procedure. We have a website dedicated to this relative direct support employee, and it is the simplified process with one form. We're having, as anticipated, a few glitches with the implementation, but on the whole, it's working rather well. We've actually shared this procedure now with DMA and DMH, and they haven't told us to stop, so that's a good thing. They seem to like the idea that it's all electronic.
Stops come faster than yeses.
Right. So we did meet that. You know, there will continue to be some little glitches as we go forward. Are there any questions regarding that? Yes, Diane.
I had a question about the form, and I don't know how much discussion there was about the part where you have to put the daily pay rate for staff. What's been any of the conversation about that?
Any of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that seems a little much to me to put down people's pay rate. And I guess my other question would be, why do we have to put that down?
Well, when we originally put that on the form, it was tied to the idea that you would likely have to be paying overtime because of the 40-hour-a-week rule.
Right.
By the Fair Labor Standards Act that was repealed. And then you're not the only provider to voice concerns about sharing that pay rate. And I took that concern to the Senior Director of Provider Relations, and we often hear how our rates aren't sufficient. And why we want that information is to demonstrate that you are indeed paying like you say you are. So it's to inform the system, because if we're paying $22 an hour for in-home skill building, and all the provider's paying is $10 an hour, that's informing our implementation of services. So that's why that information's there. And I shared this with Sean Jones and the concerns from another provider. And he felt that we really needed this to inform the system. And that's why it's there. And I don't think that, it's confidential as far as when it comes into us. It's just going into a database. We're not differentiating by the employee name or what. And we're actually just gathering the data to see what people are typically paying for in-home skill building, personal care, and home intensive supports. and residential supports.
It does seem like you're gathering that information from a very tiny percentage of all of the folks that are working out there. And in fact, you know, if I've got one now, and it's residential support, so it doesn't even fall under the time and a half and all of that kind of stuff. But if I was gonna have to pay time and a half on something, then I would be paying them a whole lot less, so that I could pay time and a half. So your number could be very skewed for what we supposedly are paying.
Well, I hear your argument. But let's put this into perspective. This is a prior approval process to employ relatives and legal guardians. And we're expected first to utilize any other supports that may be available and other paid supports. And we have taken a 5 to 6 page process and put it into 1 page based on this information. We also know, based on data that's been gathered by Burns and Associates, that circumstances where family members are providing services often cost a little bit more than in circumstances where they're not. So I hear your concerns about that being on the form. I guess I could take it back and say to Sean again, but I don't foresee it changing, because we have really moved away from subjective to something that is objective with data, and that's part of the bargain. So.
It just seems like if you want to gain information on what providers are paying so that you know whether your rates are sufficient.
Well, we plan on asking that information about the entire system.
Yeah.
This is just the first step in gathering that information. That is part of the discussion too. And then with that information, we'll be able to tell if there's any differentiation too. Okay? Any other comments here in Nashville around?
I think it's a good thing that of course, I'm the guardian of an individual that receives services, but I had a meeting today, basically with my care coordinator and the agency, and what my agency's paying now, there's no excuse that people can't be found. And I think that it needs to be known what they're being paid, because
well, I mean, like I said, it's just to inform us.
right.
Are there any thoughts about this in Boone?
Yeah, this is Scott Glaze. Do you take into account in this any benefits also provided to those employees, or is it just strictly the hourly rate?
All that we're asking for right now is the hourly rate.
I think that would be very important to include benefits, because if some providers, we provide a lot of benefits that to the employees that other providers may not. That makes a big impact on that hourly rate.
That's true. Okay. I'm sure, like this part, I'm sure will be revisited over and over again. Thanks, Scott. Any other comments in Boone?
Do you have a comment?
No, I'm
Let them go. No others? Okay, thank you. All right, comments in Lenore?
We do.
Yes, hi, this is Mary Short, and I just want to, again, and I always am going to make this comment until I hear an LMEMCO make it first. The waiver and the clinical policy clearly state that if the ISP contains documentation that the individual and the team want relative as direct service employee, then that's what should happen. The waiver does not require unrelated staff to be used first. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Mary. Any other comments in Lenore?
There are not. Thanks, Jesse.
Okay, let's move on to Silva. Any other comments?
This is Walter, Jess. No comment.
That might be a first. Mark that down. Okay, we'll move on to the next action item, which is begin recording other attendees in manner similar to recording of Smoky staff on the minutes. We added that to this to the minutes this time around, so we can check that one off. The next action item is under the Home and Community-Based Services listening sessions. And we just basically reviewed what happened in the listening sessions last time. And folks are encouraged to provide comments regarding the HCBS transition plan. On the notes that were sent out, there's an email link to do that. That will continue. And next topics. I did send out electronic versions of the draft respite and assistive technology definitions to the group that's listed on my emails, and I asked that folks send their feedback to the DHHS IDD listening sessions. I know that folks are doing that because I get questions about some of the comments that the state receives. So, let's see, we've communicated procedure change to all providers. That's a duplication. Well, I guess coordinating and actually doing it are two different things, so that's occurred. And Walter, I sent you House Bill 543. Did you receive it?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So those minutes are done. Moving on to the news and announcements, and my computer's going to sleep. That's what I wish I could do. Well, the first thing I'm going to announce is this is the last time we will host this meeting out of 356 Biltmore. We have moved, most of us have moved to 200 Ridgefield, out off Brevard Road. There's still remnants of folks in this building. I think the move will be complete by the first week of April. Is that accurate? I actually moved out Friday, and I have been coming to this building for 16 years. Yeah. I have held 9 different job titles, had 11 different direct supervisors, worked for 4 different agency names, and actually supervised 3 people that at one time supervised me. And
haven't moved that much around the building.
Right. And I have actually lived in 6 different places. So we talk about constant change. This has been about the only constant in my life, and it's just been rife with change. So I find it a little emotional, which is, I guess, a good thing. But next time we will be at 200 Ridgefield, and we're also having to change the dates because if we have our meetings on the 4th Monday, it's always impacted by holidays. In January and in May. So, and I'll email this flyer out. I don't think we got them printed for everyone. We have a few, but our next meeting will be May 4th. And we will follow that with June 1st and June 29th. Our July meeting will be in June because there's so much happening in the system with the transplant and everything. We will move those 3 dates, and I believe the 4th is a Monday, isn't it?
Saturday, oh, in May?
May 4th is a Monday.
Yeah, it should be a Monday. I think we moved it.
Yeah,
So,
first Monday.
this will be emailed out to everyone, and it'll also go on the stakeholders webpage, which I'll make sure everyone gets a link to that. There is the Kelly. Is Kelly in Silva today? She's not. She sent information about the NC TASH conference, and it's about preparing students with significant disabilities for college and careers. The information about this is in your packet. The conference will be May 15th and 16th in Greensboro. Anyone that is receiving innovations, we can access services through natural communities. What's the name of the service? Someone? Thank you. Natural Sports Education. For them to attend this conference if they would like. So keep that in mind. We also have the, it's not on the NC Tide is occurring in Wilmington, April 26th through the 29th. And there's a rather robust IDD agenda, even though it's in Wilmington. There's some really good things to attend. Ann Palmer, she's the parent of an adult with autism, and has written 4 or 5 books about autism and navigating the system. She will be presenting on Monday, and then on Tuesday, April 28th, Lynn Siegel of Hope House Foundation will be doing a 2-part series about moving from programs to supports. And she's nationally known, served on the President's Commission for Intellectual Developmental Disabilities. And she's a very dynamic speaker, and her organization is doing a lot of the things that we hope to see some of our organizations move towards with regard to movement away from ICFs, because let's see, that's expected at the national level, and some people would argue it's the best thing. I know other people argue that it's not the best thing, but it is what it is. It's good to hear her ideas. Another announcement is we will be having we're parents that are self-directing and using the employer of record model for parents and guardians. We'll be having some internal meetings with those folks to talk about ways to improve self-direction and to make it more accessible for people. Our first meeting will be April 7th regarding this. And we'll be meeting with our financial services agency to talk about the documentation pieces. We'll be taking a look at some of the items in our manual, which is really our procedure. And it still says draft because we can change it. And since we haven't been given a lot of pushback regarding changes to the relative as direct support employee procedure, which we made it, I mean, there's things that people do not like about it, but it is not near as complex as the other procedure with the part A, B, C, D forms. I think that we can move to simplify things in our procedure for employer of record, and DMA will be okay with that and may very well follow suit, because that seems to, I know that people are looking for easier ways to do things based on all of the IDD listening sessions. And Robin, you sent an item to me that I did not get added to the agenda, an announcement.
Really?
I don't remember the topic right now, but I'll look for it.
Master care coordinator. Because I think it's going to be at 1 o'clock, 2 to 5.
What did you say, Robin?
I will have to look for my email to you. It escapes me.
Okay. Well,
Thank
it'll
you.
go out with everyone else, or with all the other things that we send out. Are there any questions about the announcements?
Yeah, I know what it is, Jesse. Can you, I sent you a scan of this, which is an announcement for the Southern Angel Special Needs Pageant. It's in our region over here in Murphy, but I sent you a scan, and if you can just include that in your next mail out.
Okay, I will. Any other comments about news announcements in Silva?
Yeah, Jesse, this is Walter. Part of the reason that I, as a parent, haven't been interested in looking at employee for record is because the state, I don't feel, has been really clear in, I know that provider companies, they do a lot of monitoring and oversight, and there doesn't seem to be that element in this employee of record. And that kind of concerns me because that pretty much leaves the individual and the family, in my opinion, as a way to possibly lose their services because somebody comes down and they're not doing things correct as far as papers are missing. Because provider companies go through a rigid process of accreditation. They spend a lot of money, a lot of time. They have people hired to just deal with the audits of the MCO and the different people. So one of the reasons that I, as a parent, won't do that is because I don't see where there actually is that oversight. And I'm fearful, but there's nothing clear on that. And so that kind of makes me nervous as a parent.
Good point.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We have a family member here that would like to comment on that. That's
Sure.
an employer.
I've been doing employer of record since the middle of December. Prior to that, I mean, basically what I did was just simply bring on staff that had been with me for 3 years and 2 years that I had been doing all of the supervision for. I hired them. I trained them. Nobody could train them from the provider agency. It was me doing all the work to begin with, and with the help of somebody else who's employer of record, we've established a system where the documentation doesn't even leave the house. I have a documentation station in my kitchen. I have to know exactly what's going on with my son, and I will tell you that I saw the queue from my son's agency once during the last 12 months prior to us going to EOR. I trust my workers implicitly. They know my son because of the tenure that they've had with him. He has a life that he never had before. I used to feel guilty that he was living with me and that if something would happen to me that he wouldn't know what to do. And basically now it's a good night, Mom, and a good morning, and he's off and he's on his own life. And it's exactly what Jesse was explaining at the last meeting about his dream of having our individuals with intellectual disabilities, you know, fully integrated into the community. The documentation and the timesheets are very little problem. I work full-time. I sign off on their timesheets. I told them before I hired them, no documentation, nothing goes on the timesheet. We set the standards, and it has worked beautifully for us. Same
You got an
here.
audit by the MCO yet?
She hasn't had an audit yet, no.
Okay.
But we have to, I will, care coordinators have to monitor monthly
Yeah, I've had
when there's employer record.
she's looked at our care coordinator has looked at our records.
Right.
And there will be monitoring by the same group that monitors the providers. they will, we gotta get them in practice for at least 6 months before we start looking. But there will be monitoring, and there is the same expectations. There's just not the payment for credentialing and those kind of things, not credentialing, accreditation. And it's not, I mean, employer of record is one of those models. It's for some, it's not for everyone, because you have to be willing to dedicate your time to it, and you have to have the skills necessary to do it. So
On your own staff.
and be willing to do it. So it's something that I mean, it's never going to, I don't think. It's just an option that people need to have that want that option. That's it. I would encourage it for folks that are willing to do it. I do know that there's people that would like to do it that are going to need a lot of help from us to get to the point to where they can do it. So it's, as with every one of the things that's been said over and over in the listening sessions too, and I think Dave Richards made comment about it several times, is that we need an employer of record or a self-direction option that is workable for families so that it's not too complex for people to do it. And that's the goal really we would like to see, and maintaining the oversight that's needed. But I appreciate your comments, Walter.
Steve,
Yes.
could we look into setting up a mock audit in advance of an actual audit to see?
And that's a great idea.
Yeah, I want to try to do a little bit of it there at that meeting on the 7th.
And that's some of the topics we'll be discussing. Yeah. So if you really have a lot of interest in self-direction, you're currently doing it, please try to attend that meeting on the 7th from 2 to 5 at 200 Ridgefield.
If you have peers, maybe you could do each other, because that's how we do in our QA/QL with our group. We just audit each other, and that's how we get prepared.
Yeah, I just wouldn't,
There's a long range check.
I mean, in my business, I go through audits, I just wouldn't know in this particular area what the audit would entail.
So the meeting is not just for people who are employer of record, but those that are interested.
Well, preferably it's for folks that are already doing it to find the kinks. Yeah, it is really targeted at folks that are already doing it so they can inform us with the problems.
If you could bring the standards, if there are some standards for the audit that outline, if there's surveyor, interpretive guidelines or something like that, that would be really helpful for us to see that.
And I'll set up the conference line so that folks that are from other counties, like you originally said, is that we only have folks from Buckingham County doing it, but we've spread.
Good for Walter for bringing it up.
So that folks from other counties can call in.
Okay, excellent.
For those of you that are, to make sure people can hear you.
Did everyone hear what Lindy said?
No.
Yes.
No, we didn't hear Silva.
Okay. The meeting that's scheduled for employer of record self-direction is April 7th from 2 o'clock until 5. It will be held on site at 200 Ridgefield. I'm not sure of the room, but that will be emailed out to this group. And we will also set up a conference line for persons that are in other counties to call in if they can't make the drive to Ridgefield.
Yeah.
Jesse, this is Heather in Boone. Will you or someone be sending an email to the families that do self-direction so they know of that conference?
Yes, we're communicating it through the care coordinators.
Okay.
So I will not be sending an email directly.
Heather, you'll need to tell your families.
Will do.
Thank you.
Any other comments in Boone or Lenore, Silva? Okay. The Home and Community-Based Services Transition Plan. This plan has been submitted to CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It was submitted March 20th. What's happening?
I bet they tested it from Richfield.
You think so?
There was that much stuff in the boardroom.
That's good to know that they're calling us here. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah.
There, one way. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
But this home and community-based services transition plan, this is something, I want to provide a little bit of education around this because I think there's a lot of confusion.
Correct.
And there's more fear associated with it than there should be. This is required in all 50 states.
Correct.
I gotta close this door because I can hear the vacuum cleaner. It's required in all 50 states because a number of states have home and community-based service waivers, like NC Innovations, that aren't necessarily completely meeting the expectations established by the by CMS. And it doesn't just apply to NC Innovations in North Carolina. It applies to the Community Alternatives Program for disabled adults and the Community Alternatives Program for children. The idea behind this, and its philosophy from CMS, is that persons that are living in the community should not be treated as persons that are living in an institutional setting. And if you think about the way that laws have evolved in this nation around Medicaid services, we really have this great hairball. Exactly. It's a hairball of policies and procedures and laws built upon policies and procedures and laws. And what's happened is that the laws are built upon institutional laws, and you have certain six-bed group homes that are still very much like an ICF, IID, an intermediate care facility or an institutional setting. And the goal of these home and community-based service standards is to move the system away from that group model. And it's addressing day support services and it's addressing supported employment services. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be out shutting down day programs. It means that we're going to be expecting day programs to be truly individualized in what they provide. Now, in some ways, an individualized plan may have some group services incorporated, and it may have individual services incorporated. But the one defining thing in day services is that it's going to start and end at a day program that's licensed. For residential homes, if you've got a person that's living in a 6-bedroom home, for it to meet home and community-based service standards, they have to have their own room. They have to have choices over the colors they paint their room. They have to have access to the kitchen like anybody else would have access to the kitchen, unless there's a real reason why they can't have access to the kitchen. You might have someone with pica that cannot have unrestricted access to the kitchen. Those kind of things are what this is about. It's about increasing the rights of individuals with intellectual disabilities. It's not about shutting providers down. And it's not about anything but making life better for persons with intellectual disabilities or on the waiver. So I just want to put that out there. And North Carolina, along with every other state in the nation, had to submit a transition plan that ensures that we meet home and community-based service standards. And in North Carolina's plan, which is posted on that webpage that's just dedicated to this, the first step is a provider self-assessment. That means the first step in our plan is just for the provider to take a close look at the services they're providing and go through a list of questions on this assessment and determine whether or not, with their policies and procedures and the way they're working with persons, that they are meeting home and community-based service standards. You know, a provider should recognize certain red flags. They should notice that, the only time anyone goes out on a community outing is Wednesday when everybody goes bowling. That's a red flag in a home and community-based service setting. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be asking providers to do in this self-assessment, is really evaluate. First, they're going to answer the question of whether or not they intend to meet home and community-based service standards. Well, now, if it's an ICF home, this does not apply. So they will not have to do this. But if it's a 6-bed group home where people are receiving innovation services, the provider is going to have to do this. If it's a 3-bed AFL, the provider is going to have to do the self-assessment. And the provider will complete this self-assessment form, and they'll submit it to the LME, MCO, and we'll record their responses. And if the provider feels that they are not meeting a certain standard, they need to explain how they plan to meet this standard over the coming 3 or 4 years. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not a plan of corrective action, but a plan of action. It's look, we're aware that we need to change something. This is what we're going to do. And I think any provider that takes an honest look at their services will find places where they can improve on this topic with regard to residential supports, day supports, and support employment. But you have circumstances with support employment where the provider's employing the person, and it's not real employment because the job wouldn't exist if the person wasn't receiving support employment. You know, it's those kind of things that we have to look at closely. So we should be viewing this, it's more procedure and process, but it is a step towards making the system work better for persons receiving labor services. And with all that said, there's some very tight timelines that the division has handed us. The first of those is going to be a pilot where each LME-MCO we select 3 large providers, 3 medium-sized providers, and 3 small providers. And we share that information with the division. And the division will pick 2 large providers, 2 medium providers, and 2 small providers for us to work with for the self-assessment. We'll share the self-assessment with them, and they will complete the document, submit it. We'll take a look at it, and we'll give feedback about how it works. We're looking for ways to make it as smooth as possible for communication. After the pilot is completed, and the pilot has to be completed by early June, we will roll out this self-assessment to every provider in the state. And that self-assessment form will have to be completed by a certain date. I think it's sometime in September. That information will come in, and it will inform the system, and we'll be working with providers to move them to correct the items that they've identified. And then we'll also be questioning some of the things that have been sent to us, because as is with everything, some folks will be right on and recognize the things that they need to fix. And the tool's pretty clear, to be honest with you. It gives you some good examples. And in other circumstances, folks will there will be some challenges in other circumstances. So that's what this home and community-based services final rule is about. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Nobody's gonna have their services pulled. I mean, we've got, I wanna say it's 4 more years to work it out. So, the first step was getting the plan submitted, and that's happened. Now that I've shared with all of that, I'm gonna start and ask if there's any questions about that in Boone.
Yeah, we've got one, just a second, just a second.
Some of the stuff you were talking about, Jesse, like in our HUD group home, I mean, we can't paint different colors and things because we have restrictions with HUD. So is that gonna be looked into?
I know that topic is being broached and discussed because it is bigger than just innovations. So, yes.
Well, it's actually, if I might add, it's actually not about painting the room, but being able to decorate the room.
Okay.
Individualize the room.
Yes.
So painting's really oversimplified when I say that.
Yeah, it's not about painting the room.
Did you hear that, Christie? With clarification, like if the person wants to hang a poster on the ceiling, they should be allowed to hang a poster on the ceiling. And as long as it's not over the light, it creates a fire hazard.
Right.
Those kind of things. It's not necessarily painting the room. So overgeneralized or oversimplified.
Okay.
Any other thoughts in Boone?
Yeah, Jesse, this is Scott. The self-assessment that you were talking that the providers do.
Not really.
Is that something that, you said the pilot would be in early June. Is that something we would be able to get a look at or anything anytime soon?
The self-assessment, it's 9 pages, and it is posted on the website, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw it. It looks simpler than I thought.
And there's a companion document. I'll resend that and really highlight that it's there, okay? Because it is kind of hidden in the web page. But it's there, and it gives you a guide of the questions, and it's pretty thorough, really. There's been a lot of complaint about it, but it's like anything. There's good and there's bad, or there's... Yeah, any other thoughts in Boone?
Well, it doesn't necessarily meet the service definition for day supports if you're talking about day programs too. So.
With regard to group, right?
Well, just a lot of it. I mean, starting and ending at a licensed facility and, I don't know, we have such strict schedules right now that it seems like the service definition is gonna have to change a lot before it's gonna be in compliance with that.
Let's see. Well, we have the draft service definition to talk about a little bit later. Okay. Any other thoughts in Boone?
We're good.
Excellent. Any thoughts in Lenore?
I believe we're good, Jesse.
Any thoughts in Silva?
Hey, ladies. Just a second. Y'all have any thoughts?
I'll ask, just for curiosity, on that home community, we were just talking amongst ourselves about the lockable doors, and that's concerning if it were it says home though, but if it were a group home and someone wouldn't let you in, you couldn't get into them safely, or for safety. We were talking about that, what you and I were talking about.
Lockable doors?
It talks about provider-owned or controlled home and community-based residential settings. It says, have privacy in their unit, including lockable doors, choice of roommates, and freedom to furnish or decorate the unit. The lockable door part is what she and I were talking about, because it's concerned as a parent to her. I'm throwing her under the bus.
Well, it talks about a lockable door, but it doesn't say that the AFL provider can't have a key.
It's access to privacy.
Yeah, think about it as access to privacy. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you for outstanding on.
Yeah, and you know, I would encourage, like, you know, go to that link and send those comments too. Don't just rely on my response and my answer.
She's added her email so that she can get your stuff too.
Okay.
On the signage, he added on the sign-in sheet. Okay. Thank you.
And Jesse, wouldn't the ISP identify if there's something that is invasive on somebody's privacy or rights? Because, you know, like, there are some people that aren't registered sex offenders out there that are receiving services that, you know, you don't want to have them in certain environments. And so wouldn't ISP or behavior plan address those things?
It definitely should.
They should? Okay.
Yes.
So then that should justify why they need locked doors, unlocked doors, or those types of things.
Yes, all that stuff should be identified in the ISP. That's a good point. Have I gone to every room on that topic? Oh. I wonder why I did that. So any thoughts on Asheville?
I have asked questions about pilot agencies. Can people request to be a pilot project, or what are you going to be looking for in the pilot?
We are randomly selecting those that are participating in the pilot. We've pulled data based on number of clients served in each service, and we will be sending the top 3. They gave us a range. I can't remember exactly what the range was, but anybody that serves more than this amount was considered large, and between this amount was considered medium, and then the less than an amount was considered small. And we're basically just going to randomly select from those 3 ranges.
You haven't picked them already?
We haven't picked them already, no. We're not necessarily going to send the top 3. We'll do that in the Innovations Committee. And it's on the agenda for this Wednesday because we've pulled the data, and it will more or less be randomly determined by the group. And then we'll be sending the names up to the state. Like the ones that are small and just in our area, those will likely get selected. The larger ones, you know, they're going to be touched on probably throughout the state. So we'll see who they come back with.
You're setting up 3 and getting 2 back.
Right.
And that's 3 out of all the counties that Smoky serves.
Yes. Well, 3 large.
Right, 3, no,
We're setting up 9 total.
And you're gonna, they'll send you back 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Isn't that a wonderful step that makes wonderful, just loads of sense?
So if you all randomly choose someone,
They're just double
do
rated.
they have an option whether to do it or not do it, or do they have to if they're randomly get their?
It hasn't really been cleared that it's an option with regard to doing the self-pilot. It's kind of like,
It's like a monitoring.
I mean, you're going to have to do it anyway.
I'd rather be in the pilot.
Well, that's what, I mean, but we can't request to be in the pilot.
Well,
And I'm not saying that we are, but but I'm just under a front
Well,
if we
you
do
see,
so many services.
and the pilot's not, we're just doing a little pilot piece to clarify any of the kinks, which it won't catch them all. And that's the purpose of it. So it's not, the process isn't going to change very much from the pilot to the actual. And so that's the best I can do. Any other thoughts? Okay. So we move on beyond home and community-based services final rule. I'll continue to resend that link though, just to keep people abreast of it. And I will actually, on our Innovations Stakeholders Committee webpage, I will upload the actual assessment document to the next month's meeting, so folks can easily access it there too. because there's that document and a companion document. And it's my goal to work with the state to have something all electronic, similar to the form that we just created, so that there's a link that you fill out and it's trackable. That way you do it, we know you did it, that kind of thing. So we'll see what happens with that.
Jesse, is there any waiting for CMS to approve what they sent in?
Yep.
Or are we just assuming they're going to approve it?
Well, being that we sent it in about as late as it could be sent in, it's pretty much a safe bet that it will be approved in some manner. We will likely get some minor corrections to it, but it's one of those things we just have to keep moving forward with. Okay.
And when will we know that they've accepted it?
Well, anytime something's submitted to CMS, they have 90 days to give us feedback. And as soon as they give us feedback, it restarts the clock.
So that 90 days can go 10 times.
Right. But I don't foresee that, because the plan actually does, because everything's becoming more and more electronic, it's not as much like it used to be, in that everything had to be sent back and forth in this bulk. It's more of a structured application that's electronic, and that's been submitted. So it identifies any changes and the new pieces, and it has all the elements, because you can't submit it without it having all the elements. So I don't think we'll have the back and forth like we've had with regard to this piece. Now, we may see that with regard to the new waiver and those definitions, which we can segue into now. The committee meetings continue regarding the waiver updates, the waiver modifications, changes. I think in your packet, you have the draft day supports definition. With the feedback that's been attached to it. Actually, this isn't really the draft as much as it is the definition with feedback from the state stakeholders group. And in the handout, you'll see some of the comments that came from the state stakeholders group on the right side, like changes some of the language. With regard to day supports, this service, when we moved from CAP to SMC Innovations, blended day supports and developmental day and adult day health. And in some way, a lot of the feedback that they're getting is to make it very clear how those are separated in the definition. Any thoughts about day supports here in Asheville?
Well, Jesse, transportation continues to be an issue. You know, as a day program, you have to be licensed. In order to be licensed, you have tremendous expenses. You have to pay rent for your building, you have to have the power on, you have to have the phone, you have to have, I mean, there's a zillion things that you have to have, tables and chairs and equipment and all that. Overhead. You have lots and lots of overhead. And it is the lowest paid, if you have group, it is the lowest paid of the services. And then to add transportation onto that, there's no money. You're either going to have a quality program where you do person-centered and you do the real things, or you're going to have transportation. You can't have both. It's not workable. And so that really needs to be addressed. They're not, whoever designed this and put that in there is really not taking into consideration the major expenses that you have and having a licensed facility as well. All the other services pay more, and you don't have to have any of that overhead.
And we brought that up at the listening session. Wanda and I both preached on that and shared the information that Jesse Francis and I brought to you. We made it very clear that that had to be addressed for this service to continue if they're going to be strict about this, because it would cause programs like mine and Wanda's to have people having to get up at 3 in the morning to try to transport people. You know, if we did, and then what do you do in cases where you have people that have it, like behavioral issues? You can't put them all together in a vehicle, and it's a conundrum, really. And I just want to see it be addressed, and I felt like that was really glossed over in the listening session, based on the information we gave them and then the feedback we received.
So now,
People that you said,
you know, we have people that choose to come to our program, they drive 45 minutes one way. They choose to do that because they want a quality program. We have people that are in Western, we have people that drive all the way from Marshall, we have people that drive all the way from Tryon, because that's the program that they choose. Well, we couldn't possibly drive all the way to Marshall to pick them up. So in the policy, can it be that they, we can provide transportation within a certain radius of miles, but we can't, and then we get to that point, but to say, because they're gonna go. No, you don't, we need some clarification on this.
We don't want to start picking, it's either you're able to do it or you're not. And there are some people who can participate or not, but what's interesting is, at that last stakeholders meeting, the information from the consultant company was that the service definition that's grown the most in the last year was the day program, and the individual service in the day program. So it's not like these are made up concerns. I mean, it's a significant service, a growing service, but a very complicated one given the reimbursement rate.
Well, actually, and that's true. It's a very complicated one, and the rate is for day supports individual. It actually reimburses 90 cents per unit greater than any of the other habilitation services, other than supported employment. And with regard to there is a group in-home skill building rate that also reimburses. When you compare in-home skill building group to day supports group reimburses at about 92 cents more per unit. Those are the additional costs that are built into the rate for transportation. Now, the policy states that a day program must provide transportation, because it doesn't actually say it must provide transportation. It says that transportation is built into the rate. If you are providing day supports group to a person 6 hours a day, you're basically pulling down about $22 that's considered for the transportation. Well, now, if you contract with a mountain mobility, because that's here in Asheville, that's costing you $30 a day.
Per trip.
Or per trip. So $60 for transportation. Well, if a person lives in an AFL, who wants that person to go to a day program the most?
The AFL.
Well, why do you have to contract with mountain mobility? Can't you say, if you provide transportation, we will give you so much per mile? And contract it out to
we
those.
did do the similar thing, what we discussed. We just said to people, we have a certain amount of slots available, and you're welcome to be on the waiting list, but it's still, people still beat on the door for it.
You have to offer transportation, and you offer it around what you can in your policy and what you can afford. But there is money built into the rate, and I mean, I'm not going to discourage you from sending in information and feedback, because that's what I want you to do, because you're not the only person that talks about the rates. It's all around, because transportation is a challenge.
it doesn't say you have to provide all of the transportation, you just have to help with the
You
transportation.
have to offer transportation to and from.
And what it says in
It
door to door.
doesn't say you can choose client A and not client B.
And it
Right.
says door to door in the service definition.
Right,
But it doesn't say that you, I think it says door to door.
Yeah, it does, it says in the home, and it says the individual's home, yeah, transportation to and from the individual's home.
Yeah.
Well, out of 50 clients in the day program, we have 7 that receive individual services.
But, well, individual and groups pay the same, so if you tell the same amount almost for transportation.
It's built
It's
in.
added to the rate.
Right.
It's built in. So if you are telling the family member that wants the person to come to the day program, that you will get, say they're coming round trip 20 miles, you say, well, here's your allotment for providing transportation. You're providing transportation.
But they're still not taking into consideration the amount of money that it costs to rent a building and keep power on, and water on,
An in-home skill building provider has to rent an office space. A provider that's not providing day supports rents office space.
It's not licensed, but it can be a little hole in the wall.
No, it's not licensed.
It's not licensed, it could be a little tiny hole in the wall, so it doesn't have to be specific instructions. I mean, you know, I've been to other agencies that rent office space. I mean, they rent tiny little offices and, you know, they don't have to pay, they don't have to have these huge rooms.
We know you're not.
Well, and that's, I'm
about
gonna,
that, but it's just that really truly needs to be looked at and considered, the expenses
and it,
operating a day program.
and like I said, keep making the argument.
And we brought it up at NCAR, and that was also an issue that Melissa Barron, who works for the Enrichment Center and president of NCAR, took to the stakeholders meeting, the state stakeholders meeting. She brought that to the table to discuss, but I don't just, you know, there's so many other issues that it's just one of a few.
Okay. We need to involve the other rooms. Because we've already lost Sylvia. You see them talking there? Walter's paying attention. What does Sylvia have to say about day supports?
Well, I can say, kind of I attended some of those listening sessions, and yeah, those providers had a lot to say to those people from the state. But the thing I see the big barrier is group versus individual. Because if you have a bunch of people in group, that hurts your accessibility to that community. I understand that there's rates for money built into getting the person to the day program, but then how do you get them out into the community? When you once get there, that's the whole thing the feds are talking about, is accessibility to community. And there's nothing there if you're spending all the extra transportation money getting them to and from. And where's the money to allow them to get out there and go bowling individually? With the group rate, you don't have, it's really difficult to, when I did group services a long time ago, when I accessed the community, it was like I was the sun and all my clients rotated around me. They were never all by themselves because there was just one me and there was a group of us. And it looks like a little solar system. You have this little posse that moves as a group around a site. And everybody knows you're a disabled group because you're all together. You can't spread out because there's nobody to go and watch and help. And that was always a big barrier because we moved as like a little satellite unit all over the place. And as long as your rates are not individualized, you're going to have a problem with that. That's what I got to say.
Anyone else in Sylvan? Okay. How about Lenore?
I'm good.
We're good in Lenore, just.
Okay. How about Boone?
I have some things to say. That cost finding for the rate was done 15 years ago. So we need to take that into consideration and perhaps have a new cost finding. I mean, if anything, the rate has been cut. It hasn't been increased when gas prices increased. You know, now you have to throw in insurance for the ACA. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed in 15 years. So Also, you can't bill while you're transporting. So if you have people that you're bringing in from a long ways, you're transporting, you could be transporting an hour a day for somebody, and you can't bill during that time. There's not money to pay us to drive people home and back, not be able to bill, and then have to pay mileage.
And pay the staff.
And pay the staff. And then, I also want to say that we can't always group individuals together by age and preference of the individual, because not every individual wants the same thing, and we only have one group right now that we're working with, and so you can't necessarily, I mean, it's just really hard to get those groups perfect unless you have like a lot of referrals at the same time. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And then what is the transitional sheltered workshop? What is that?
Transitional sheltered workshop is, and that's the language in the definition.
Yeah.
Under number 1.
Those are the circumstances where you still have adult day vocational placement embedded in some day support providers.
Okay.
And folks are working, doing piece work for substandard minimum wage.
Right.
You can't be billing, a person can't be receiving day supports while they're doing that.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay? All valid points. Anything else in Boone?
Why can't they do piece rate work while they're getting day support? That's what care coordinators are asking us to do all the time.
Oh, well, I guess I didn't state that correctly. They can do that as long as it's around pre-vocational skills, like staying on task. And so I misspoke. It's staying, if they're doing skills like staying on task or following directions, those kind of things, it's allowable. The goals can't be around the person learning to do the task as much as everything that orbits around the task.
Skill specific, not product specific.
Right, thank you.
Exactly, yeah, okay, I get that.
Yeah, do we make things complicated enough? Okay. So, we're going to move away from Boone before I say something else wrong.
I'm recording.
I guess that.
I'm recording it, so, you know. Just
That's
kidding.
okay.
Just joking, just joking.
Mary's recording it and it is on her website. Okay. Let's see. The other definition that we had, lost my agenda again. Very disorganized today. I didn't give you a definition because there hasn't been one really modified yet. It's just the one that's available. This is talking about residential supports. And the reason I don't have one is because I haven't been given the draft yet. The only one we have is the one that is in the waiver. And basically, they're going to go to the state stakeholders group Friday, this coming Friday. And they're going to ask that group if they want to clearly identify the amount of respite that's expected for the residential supports day rate and AFLs, or if the group wants a separate service for residents allowed in AFLs. Do you want to make it a rate that includes respite and clearly defines how much respite is included in the rate? Or do you want to go back to the way it used to be where you have the day rate and the person can get so many hours of respite?
Separate.
So that they're going to take that question to the state stakeholders group, and I'll be emailing that question out to you as soon as they take it to that group for your feedback. Now, one thing to consider in this is that The way the AFL rates are now is we pay $5 more a day. And it's also written to where a person cannot receive the rest or the relief outside of their home.
That's a problem.
That's the biggest problem with the definition. So some of the discussion is, well, if you change it to where the residential supports rate is more than just the $5, which allows for basically 32 hours of respite, or 18 hours of respite a month by the current rate. But if you change the definition to where relief staff can be provided up to a certain amount based on the rate, and allow that relief be wherever the client wants the relief to be, so that it can be either in the home or outside the home, and then you still stay with just a day rate, then you don't have to stack a periodic service on top of this day rate. And some of the merit in doing that, instead of going back to the old way, is that the provider is just dealing with one rate still. And they can have multiple staff to do the respite. And you don't run into multiple services being billed on the same day. So that's one of the arguments in managed care, to use just the 1 day rate. There's even talk about maybe giving the provider a weekly rate for residential supports, so that you're responsible 7 days a week. Here's your weekly rate, and you provide the relief and those kind of things. Those are some of the tools that are going to be available in managed care if we start thinking more creatively. We need to think more creatively rather than how we've always done things. That's some of the thinking about why we would want to stay with a day rate, or even maybe consider a weekly rate. Of course, now it's really easy just to say, well, if we go back to the standard rate and allow respite, everyone grasps that because we've already done it.
But the advantage of that is if you create a plan and say we're going to have that much respite, you've got documentation, because I hear families not understanding the AFL, and if the providers are going to take advantage of their AFL providers, they could say, well, that's so many hours of respite when they're banking the extra. So if it's documented in the plan how many hours of respite it is and it's paid for, then everybody knows it's a black and white. There's a check and balance. There's a black and white.
Yeah, but you have to also remember that the budgeting is going to be very different moving forward in this waiver too, because folks are going to be working within a range that's established by certain assessments and the ISP. So it can work both ways. I'm not trying to sway anything at all. I'm just trying to provide as much information as possible.
Things need to be clear so everybody.
It needs to be very clear and outlined well in the ISP.
But you're asking the stakeholder group to make a decision or a recommendation.
They're going to make a recommendation, and it will be, the way this is going, whatever they recommend tends to be the way we're going.
But yet, is the information there to overlie that support intensity thing? So I can envision that little Walter will have a budget of X and there's no money for respite. Is that how the supports intensity scale range could work? Because little Walter picks this many hours of supported employment, this many hours of community networking, and this many hours of respite is whatever's left. Am I understanding it correctly?
It is a possibility that you would be given a number that you can't work within, but the team would then be able to request services in excess of that number. Yeah, you'll have them. A lot of folks will fall within a certain range, but one of the pieces of the settlement is that we can't say to anyone that you're assigned this budget of $60,000, you can't exceed it. You just have to justify, and you can request over it. But that's one of the basic tenets of that. It caused a lot of the problems. Is folks were given a budget amount and told you can't exceed this. The only budget amount we cannot exceed, period, is the 135 that's written into the waiver.
So is it budget driven or is it hours of service driven, or will it continue to be both? a maximum if you're not in an AFL is 12 hours a day? Or is it budget driven, such that I can take my budget?
Well, that discussion's not completely been had, but it will be, there will be some form of limits within the waiver. I don't know what they will be.
Why?
And it's not super clear what direction will go. It's possible that you'll have the budget, you'll have certain expectations within that budget, but I don't foresee there being certain limits on services that exist now.
Okay. That to me sounds positive.
There will probably be some form of limit, but I think there will be more flexibility if it's within the budget.
And this is my concluding comment. Educating parents who are just holding their nose above water with this new budgeting, flexibility, service-driven consumer kind of thing is going to require additional skills on the part of the care coordinator. And if I can diplomatically say this, there would probably need to be some training.
For the care coordinator.
With care coordinators to make sure that they understand how to explain it, because I can just tell you as one whose nose sometimes falls below the water, it's hard to know what you don't know.
No.
And care coordinators have a really big caseload. And I want in this new system to have somebody who's got the time to explain it. I want somebody who's got the skill and the ability to explain it.
Yeah, so we went to due process just because the care coordinator did not, and they said you can't have but so many hours a day. What it was is they couldn't have so many hours a day of individual skill building. They could add on personal care. Mother never understood that. I mean, Disability Rights was filing a complaint with Smokey over this, and all I said was, wait a minute, Mom, you can't go over so many in-home skill building. You can add on personal skills. Well, they didn't explain that to me.
Well,
The care coordinator didn't do it either.
Well, now, sometimes it is explained and sometimes it's not, and so there's lots of stories around that because everyone brings their own perception into it.
Yes, there is always truth is somewhere in the middle.
And exactly, that's why I love that Oscar Wilde quote. The truth is rarely pure and it's never simple, because that really grasps most of what we do. But there will be extensive training regarding working within this budget because it will be required due to events in the system and missteps in the past.
Training opportunity.
Yes.
And it needs to be training for parents, training for providers, and training for care coordinators. And then if all three of them get to the meeting, then maybe one of them is going to know what they're doing at any point in time. Because it's going to be very different, very difficult.
It is, no doubt. So do know that the question regarding residential supports and respite, embedded or not, will come up in the future. Any thoughts in Lenore?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts in
Wait, we're backing up, Jesse, hold on a minute. Go ahead.
Do you want to know what else happened at the March 6th stakeholder meeting in Raleigh? Or is that for some later point on the agenda?
Actually, Mary, since you're already, if you were there, it'd be great to hear about it.
Well, because it's not about a service definition, it's about durable medical equipment. There was a gentleman from DMA, and he was there. This was the first time DMA was addressing any group with this durable medical equipment idea. Apparently, there had been some direction given, I don't know from who or how, but they wanted to speak to the group about changing the incontinence supply clinical policy. Currently, there are 192 pull-ups or briefs that are allowed per month if you are a Medicaid recipient, durable medical equipment. And word had come down from above that they were going to change that number effective June 1st to 100 per month of pull-ups and briefs. And so the stakeholder group, thank goodness, did the math immediately, and Cindy Ellers, particularly from ECBH, did the 192 math, which is 6 a day, and the 100 a day, and the 100, which is 3 a day. And Cindy was quite eloquent in her comments to this gentleman, asking him if he would like his soiled panties changed 3 times a day. So the bottom line came that he would get back to the group. There was some questions raised about the money. There's $28 million spent on incontinence supplies currently, and between, out of 2 million Medicaid recipients, I don't know if that's a lot or not. But word came down about 4 days after the meeting that they decided not to implement the change effective June 1st. I sent an email with the link to the video on my YouTube site to all members of the Joint House Appropriations Health and Human Services Committee, and told them that, these were the kinds of decisions that were being made by people that we don't elect. But I also included in my email to all members of that committee that I certainly would be filing a Federal Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights complaint if such a change were to occur, because I couldn't possibly fathom how anyone would be able to participate in the community if they were only allowed 3 pull-ups or briefs. So.
Thanks for, is there anything else, Mary? Or does that summarize?
And I wasn't actually at that meeting. It was videotaped by someone else and posted to my YouTube site, but it's the video 2 of 3 for the March 6th 1915C stakeholder group.
Okay, I think like incontinence supplies, that's an example of how we've got to start thinking about different ways of doing things. Because it's a lot cheaper to go buy a box of diapers at Walmart.
And that came up.
A box of pull-ups. And it's kind of like, why can't we figure out a way to do vouchers in some manner?
And that came up.
We've done it in the past.
You're talking common sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Uses one each night, he sleeps in it, and that is the only one that he uses, and they got 200 a month for month after month after month. She's got them in every nook and cranny in the entire house. It's new insulation.
She could become a new provider.
She could become a provider. She could probably make more money selling them than she could, and she couldn't get them stopped. I mean, she finally got them stopped.
But let's back up and let's take it. Let's realize that that's the product of fee for service. If you get paid separately for every diaper you purchase or use or don't use in that case, there's no incentive to right size what the person receives. And that's where, as we evolve in managed care, we have the opportunity to fix things like that. It's just the system catching up, because it is that big hairball. I'm using that phrase over and over because I'm reading this book called Orbiting the Giant Hairball.
Well, if you have a cat, you get
and it really fits, because the hairball is the policies, the intricate policies built upon policies on policies, and how figuring out a way around that, being creative in ways to not let your procedure and policy drive everything that you do.
But what message is being sent to us when somebody thinks it's a viable cost saving to go from 6 diapers to 3 diapers, 6 briefs, 6 panties, 6 whatever to 3?
Or 3 times the back, 3 times the back.
It's not sending a positive message, that's for sure. But here's one thing that is happening with that. In the past, it would have just happened.
True.
Well, it did when they changed the quality.
Right, well, yeah, but in the past, they would just change the numbers and the outcry.
Right.
This time they said, this is what our plan is, and the outcry came
Before it happened.
That's a small progress.
But the thing that what bothers me is Mary said they're not gonna implement it June the 1st.
Yeah.
That doesn't
I know.
mean July the 1st or August the 1st or,
Well,
so maybe we should send an email.
I think that it's always good to communicate your thoughts through that listening session email. And suggesting that we should be accessing supplies in a mindful manner with vouchers and those kind of things that are trackable, those are solutions. Don't just send problems, send solutions.
Yeah, they listen better.
Let's see, Silva, did we have a Silva? Comment of respite
No, residential support.
or residential supports?
No, we didn't get here, but I think them getting respite again, however they decide to pay. The problem was last time is, like you said, it was a daily rate, then a hourly rate. And so then you had people that wanted to get off at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, get paid for the day, and then somebody else had to go and keep them that night for free or whatever. So I think if y'all did the daily rate and then another daily rate for the rest of it, I think that would solve that problem. Because then it would be a rate for that day, not for the evening. And that was always the problem in the past, as I remember, is you go from an hourly service from a daily service and back, you run into problems with that transition. Okay, that's it.
Any thoughts about residential supports in Boone?
No.
It's not working now because the big screen shows up.
Who's talking?
Yeah, I think about this, like in the new room in Asheville, we have 90-inch television screens for this. Life size is a little big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so let's see. In the packet that you have, there's the Assistive Technology Equipment Supplies definition. And you'll notice that in this definition, it has been really simplified to where it just has specific covered categories and also interest in this, and is on the code and rate structure. You have the two options, A or B, and A is $25,000 over the duration of the waiver. The duration of the waiver is the 5-year lifespan of the waiver. So whenever this waiver is approved, it will last for 5 years. The two options that were presented to the statewide stakeholders group were $25,000 for just equipment, or $50,000 including home mods and equipment. So this would allow persons to choose how they want to use that money more.
Go over.
Like you could get a home mod for $30,000 if it was needed, instead of having the home mod limited like it currently is. And the statewide stakeholders group preferred option B, which is the services limited to expenditures of $50,000 of add-on supports, assistive technology, equipment, supplies, and home modifications over the duration of the waiver, so that it increases flexibility. In this definition, I think we touched on it some last month, and some folks brought up how you could drive a truck through it and you could get just about anything you want, but the whole topic's, everything's still going to have to be ordered and authorized or recommended by a medical professional, a PT, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a doctor. So that definition is, for the most part, finalized. Any questions, comments about assistive technology? Any thoughts in Asheville?
No.
Any thoughts in Boone
And we're good, correct?
Yeah.
about assistive technology? We're at that point where we're starting to lose folks, right? It's getting late. Nothing in Silva?
We have one question in Silva.
Okay.
I have a question under assistive technology. There's been specific categories, and one of those is alert and monitoring systems. What does that actually do?
Nutritional supplements are captured by this definition, and so the person's getting Ensure as an adult.
No, she's talking about
The other side,
Stop. It's
the monitoring fee,
It's the
Jesse.
monitoring system.
Alert and monitoring.
Oh, monthly alert monitoring and connectivity system charges. That's the persons that live in private homes that are not provider operated. If the person has a door alarm
Like Simply Home.
that's monitored by an agency like Simply Home, then that monitoring fee,
It wouldn't cover like, cameras to keep an eye on providers in your child's room and throughout the house.
Yeah, it would, but.
it would.
Who's gonna sit in front of the camera?
It would be not to keep on your providers, but keep an eye on your child.
On the child.
Right.
So that,
it has to be about monitoring the safety of the person. You'd run into clients' rights issues with regard to cameras watching every move, but
Not
it
true.
could be justified in certain circumstances.
And
It's
Jesse,
both.
Certain things could be,
I would be surprised if one's allowed in a bedroom. I'd be very surprised.
yeah.
It is.
Because the bedroom is supposed to be that private area, and personally, I would hope one's never allowed in a bedroom, but I hear what you're saying.
And I
I
talked
hope it
about
would
some
be for
parents,
Katie's
though,
sake.
Because we've actually considered this for my son. There is a watch that you can use that tracks where your child's going during the day. They locator and also communicate verbally with that. But as far as cameras in the room, if my son ever chose to live independently, the only way he could do that is if we had a way we could monitor what happened or what goes on. And that it's a closed circuit system within the home. It doesn't go anywhere else outside the home. But it's really not so much, it's a safety issue for the family. It allows that independence. Sometimes it allows therapeutic ideas because some clients talk in their room about issues that they need to flush out. And that's the only way you can get that information to try to offset behaviors. So, but it would be, I could see what you're saying is a violation, but it would need to be stated in the plan somewhere along the way. But yeah, you could do it with this service definition.
and for example, our son has seizure disorders.
Right.
So it's big for a monitoring of his seizures.
Right, safety.
Yeah, so that's a safety issue. So innovations could cover a system like that. Okay. Thank you.
The way this is written, now I must say that you'd still have to, it'd have to be approved by the appropriate professional. And it could be covered. Just because the definition's written a certain way doesn't mean that everything's covered.
Is that a medical necessity that you need a letter from the physician?
Yeah,
PT language.
right.
There's no.
And there's also ways to monitor movements inside a home without any video cameras at all, with just sensors that indicate where the person's supposed to be at certain times, or if they go into the bathroom and they don't come out for 10 or 15 minutes, those kind of sensors that work too. There's some really neat stuff that you can check out at Simply Home. But this definition will allow access to those kind of things much easier than the existing definition. Any thoughts on Lenore about that?
No, sir, we're good.
Okay. The next two items on the agenda are really quick and easy. It's on the document that went out, there's a link to the stakeholders website, and that will be going out on everything from here forward. And I'll actually be adding the stakeholders things in my automatic signature too, so that anytime I interact with folks, it'll be there. I would encourage that y'all do the same thing. Just kind of add that link to your signature or your email if you have one. Because this is a place for y'all to come and voice concerns and share ideas, because we have changed something. It's different than what we had. And it's the first time in 16 years that I think I've ever changed something.
You only had one diaper in your 16.
There you go. You know, I used to receive packages of diaper samples. Big boxes. There is the Relativist Direct Support Employee Prior Approval Procedure. That's posted on our website. Please only reference the website. One thing that we've realized is making our information more consistent and accurate, we need to just put it in one place and make everything link back to that one place. So like anytime on our website, anywhere you click, Relativist Direct Support Employee, it's going to take you back to that one page. And that one page is all we're responsible for updating. On our old website, you know, we had things posted all over the place. And that's evolution of understanding how a website works too. And then I apologize for not getting the document regarding use of protective devices in this packet. We created a document in our Innovations Committee that clarifies things that we run into with regard to protective devices and what's needed in plans. This will be on next month's agenda, and I'll email it out to everyone because it references several different things. Are there any comments left in Silva?
No, Jesse, we're all quiet here.
All right, thanks, Walter. Any comments in Boone?
No, we're good.
All right, Greg. Any comments in Lenore?
We're good.
Okay. Any comments in Asheville?
Where are we towards getting the new plan written so that it is going to be submitted? I mean, before it gets submitted, there will still be a 90-day review comment period or 30-day comment period.
Once the full document is ready, before it can be submitted, there has to be a 30-day comment period. You're getting to do a lot of feedback right now before it's submitted. There will be the official public comment period when it's posted.
Final draft.
The final draft. And it will be, originally the target date was March 15th. Then it was moved until March 31st. I don't foresee it happening until maybe June, based on where it seems to be, because they keep adding and they're actually, they keep stepping back before submission because of feedback. And that the sharing that's occurring, and that's different than in the past.
And that's an important point because, you know, I may complain, but this is the first time there's been an opportunity for somebody to listen to that.
Yep.
So, you know, if you'll pass that back up the food chain, that we are aware that we're being asked, and we really do appreciate that. So.
As this is going along and you listen to all these changes in service definitions and everything, what's being done for the more involved consumers? I'm not hearing this at any meeting that I've attended. I mean, I know I hear the states looking at things, and I'm not even talking about the medically fragile. I'm talking about the consumers that came into this program in the late 80s, early 90s, that have survived this long. And back then, the only consumers that were allowed in, or individuals, were those that were the most needy. Their needs haven't lessened. So all of this, as it appears to me, is for the less needy. Are there stakeholders that are speaking up about what's going to be in the waiver for the more involved individuals that we serve?
I know there are stakeholders that are speaking up about it, because one's speaking right now. And I know that there's others doing that.
Well, I don't hear it anymore.
Well, that's because we haven't really tackled that yet, because there's a divide at DMA, because there's the argument that that need can be met by other programs with regard to medical fragility. Now, you know,
but it can't.
the severe IDD, that changes, and there's still the concept that we can address a lot of that with adjusted rates, not like we are in some
But
cases.
still, you don't have the service definitions. We're building service definitions that we're reading about all of this that we come to the meetings about. But I don't hear any service definitions for any of the individuals that are, you know, that are adults now. We're letting the CAP C individuals into the program. Those are the most needy. But I don't hear.
Do you need something more than that combined personal care intensive income at a jacked up rate? Do you need a special?
Right.
I know one coming in from Cap C that her budget's well over $135,000 and she's going to college. But she's got very high medical needs from trach and all that type of stuff. And I don't know how they're gonna.
And you don't qualify for skilled nursing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, with that, in that circumstance, you would qualify for skilled nursing on top of the waiver. Trade care.
But there were many that came in the 80s and 90s on the $135,000 waiver who didn't need the $135,000
Well, actually,
waiver too.
in the 80s and 90s, the budget maximum was very different. It didn't go to 135,000 until the 2008 waiver.
And I'm not talking just about the budget amount, I'm talking about any kind of definition, anything that addresses their needs. But, you know, personal care today does not address their needs.
Correct.
You know, in-home intensive is an every 90-day process to get, you know, reapproved, which usually it does get reapproved. But, you know, it bothers me a little bit that we're leaning toward this group of individuals and not looking at the entire individual population that's in the waiver.
This would be.
Well, it's into the home and community that at least they're addressing the ones that are in the homes and in the community.
Well, let's remember that this waiver serves a wide array of people.
Right.
We have people that are completely dependent on others that receive services through this waiver, and we have people that actually have acquired driver's license that receive services in this waiver. Now, one's equally as needy as the other in some ways regarding quality of life. It's just a matter of right sizing what a person needs. And you do run into challenges in the definitions in serving both folks. You run into challenges on the person that's able to acquire a driver's license and go to college, because you're like, well, why? How can we say this person needs these services? And then on the person that's super needy, or that's totally dependent, it's justifying the right service, because right now we have that split between rehabilitation and personal care, which is most appropriate, is the question. So those are pieces that we'll have to work out in treatment teams, because there's no way we're going to write a waiver that specifically meets everybody's needs. And that's why within the waiver you have person-centered planning and the individual support plan, because that's supposed to address most of the needs. Now, that is a challenging process, period, because you always have divergent opinions in anything. So I really can't answer your question beyond that, is that we'll have to try to address it in person-centered planning meetings and those kind of processes. Sorry, that's the best I can do. So,
I've heard that for 24 years.
we'll wrap up, for the last time from this building. And hopefully we'll see you all May 4th. Monday, May 4th, at Ridgefield with our life-size televisions.
No, wait.
Yeah, they will need to delay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Then, are you okay?
Thank you, Jesse.
May 6th.